Born on May 24th, 1952, which means that her 70th birthday just passed by a couple of months ago. And no surprise, on that occasion, I received emails and phone calls and cards from friends and family just mentioning Lori and thinking about her on her 70th birthday. So she's been much on my mind and in my heart recently. And because of that, something occurred to me that I am remiss about, that I have not done in the 6 years since she passed away, and that is to preach this sermon to you people that I'm going to preach today. So I'm a little late out of the gate with this, and forgive me, but here we go. Some of you were not yet here during the closing months of 2015 when her cancer reappeared, nor when she died on January 27, 2016. And even those of you who did know Lori probably didn't know her whole story, so I'm going to take a couple of minutes to tell you about her right here, right now. Lori Weber was raised in Des Moines, Iowa, the first of 4 children born to Bob and Ruth Weber. The next 3 in line were all boys, George, Paul, and Steve. So Lori began learning her exceptional mothering skills at a very young age. And she was her mother Ruth's little helper right from the start. A well-organized list maker who figured out what needed doing and then set about doing it, a habit that served her well throughout her life. Lori was a friend maker and a friend keeper. When we visited back to Des Moines after we were married, we visited with her friends from Hannawalt Elementary School and Roosevelt High School, friends that she had known all of her life. On those visits, we stayed at the home of her grandmother, Edith Weber, who Lori had the privilege of naming as the first of the grandchildren. Lori adored Chi-Chi, and Chi-Chi adored Lori. Chi-Chi was a bit of a celebrity in Des Moines, Iowa. She had a weekly radio show in which she would interview some books she had recently read. And when the New York publishers discovered that the housewives of Iowa were, to a woman, listening to Edith Weber's radio show every week and then running out and buying a book if she recommended it with a positive thumbs up. All of a sudden, Houghton Mifflin and Scribner's and Harper and Row started shipping cartons of books to Edith every week, box after box after box of books. Among Lori's childhood memories is standing in a line at the bank, talking with Chi-Chi, and all of a sudden the woman in front of them turned around and exclaimed, "You're Edith Weber. I would recognize your voice anywhere. I listen to your radio show every day." Chi-Chi's son, Bob, Lori's dad, was the director of Planned Parenthood of Iowa. So Chi-Chi went to Bob one day and said, "I've got an idea to raise some money for Planned Parenthood. I think we should have a book sale. My whole house, my porch, my attic, my basement is full of books. And I'm sure all of our friends have some books too, so let's have a book sale." And another memory that Lori had from her childhood was pushing shopping carts full of books into the Planned Parenthood book sale. The last time she and I visited Des Moines in 2014, old friends Nancy and Richard Lynch invited us to dinner, and Lori told that Planned Parenthood book sale story to the two of them, and their jaws dropped. And they said, "Lori, we volunteer for that book sale every year. Now it's at the Iowa State Fair. Last summer we raised $1 million. Yeah. Lori sang in the children's choir at Plymouth Congregational Church. She served as secretary of the high school girls club and swam on the high school synchronized swimming team, which was called the Sharks. And believe it or not, she and Judy Weiner swam together on that very same Sharks team because Judy was also a student at Roosevelt High School. Lori could do a ballet leg in the swimming pool and took right up to the end of her days. Bob Weber was promoted to Western Regional Director of Planned Parenthood, so the Weber family moved from Des Moines out here to Mill Valley in 1970. Lori had by then already enrolled in the University of Iowa, so she commuted out every summer to spend her summers with the family in Mill Valley. And then when she graduated in 1974, she moved out here, lucky for me. We met at work in that fall of 1974 and wasted absolutely no time falling in love. We got an apartment together in San Francisco in the spring of 1975. By the way, a very nice 2-bedroom garden apartment in Cow Hollow for which we paid $245 a month.
Oh.
Not fair, not fair. And when I hear what kids are paying now for an apartment, it was what a great deal. On our first anniversary of shacking up together, as we snuggled in bed, Lori said, "Maybe we should get married." What a great idea that was. On July 17, 1976, Bob Weber walked her down the aisle, turned around, and tied the knot. One day, Lori spotted a classified ad in the San Francisco Chronicle for the position of sales secretary at the Stanford Court Hotel, which in those days was the only 5-star hotel in San Francisco. When she went to apply, the HR director hired her on the spot as his assistant. Keen judge of character that he was, Bob Berger spent 10 minutes with Lori and knew that her future was in human resources, which indeed it was. 4 years later, when Lori and I decided to go live on the Greek island for a year with Kate Hutchinson Leary, who's back there somewhere, she was then 2. The general manager of the Stanford Court took us to dinner and leaned across the table over dessert and said, "Lori, I'm going to tell you something I've told absolutely nobody else, and the only reason I'm telling you is because you're leaving tomorrow morning. I'm leaving the Stanford Court Hotel while you're away in Greece, and I'm going to open a new hotel on Union Square, and you are going to be my opening human resources director." Brilliant choice, Bill Wilkinson. After the year of our lives in Greece, Lori pulled on her business suit and her hose and her high heels and went down to the city every day. She interviewed several thousand people to hire a couple hundred people to be the opening staff at Campton Place Hotel. As delightful a team as ever there was. 4 years later, she spotted another classified ad in the Chronicle, and the next thing you knew, we moved here to Sonoma with Kate and Tucker in 1987 so that Lori could become the Human Resources Director up at Sonoma Mission Inn. At exactly that same time, I began commuting to El Salvador 30 times over the next 6 years for my work there with the Human Rights Commission. For 10 days or 2 weeks at a stretch, Lori held down the fort here, took care of 2 young kids, and put the lion's share of the bacon on the table. In those very, very challenging and stressful days, she had my back and the kids' backs. The entire time. No complaints, never. Just support and care and love. Finally, 20 years ago, Lori left Sonoma Mission Inn and started a consulting business, Hutchinson Consulting, on the dining room table with a Rolodex and a phone. She hired me as her training director, and eventually she built us into an international brand. And then, in September of 2015, cancer, chemo, radiation, nausea, a lot of nausea. Bad news that turned into worse news. Kate and Tucker appearing to cook meals and fold laundry and glue the old man back together. Friends appearing from across the country and across the world. I learned some things in those days. I had always loved Lori, but I never knew how much I loved her until it finally became clear that we were about to lose her. I learned something else that took me completely by surprise, that grief and gratitude are opposite sides of the same coin. The deeper the grief, the deeper the gratitude, the deeper the gratitude, the deeper the grief. I learned that as much as Lori hated the thought of missing out on the lives of her children and grandchildren, she had no fear of dying. I learned that if you really need a good place to let it out, to weep and bawl and cry, the shower is a very good place to do that. And my friends, my dear friends, my community of faith, I learned how important you are and are in our lives. The food that appeared on the stoop, the balloons that appeared outside the bedroom window, the flock of goofy flamingos with their notes of encouragement and love. Our interim minister, Alan Clausen, appearing every Friday afternoon for conversation and prayer. As I wrote at the time, it was like standing in a river of blood. Lori died on a Wednesday afternoon. Alan Kelchner was scheduled to preach that very Sunday. So, of course, he ditched the sermon he had prepared to preach and preached a different one, prepared a different one to preach to all of us and to me and to my children. A very deep, very special sermon in which you referred to the death of your own father, Alan, to offer solace and a way forward to us. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, this sermon is my belated expression of gratitude to all of you. Thank you. Thank you. From the depths of my heart, thank you. Lori was Lori to the end. She surprised me one day by telling me to call Michael Tompkins and offer him the job with Hutchinson Consulting. Lori, babe, Michael Tompkins is the general manager of Miraval. He's the president of the International Spa Association. He doesn't want to come be a recruiter for Hutchinson Consulting. I already talked to him, Bill. Call him. So, of course, I did. And, of course, 2 years later, I sold Hutchinson Consulting to Michael Tompkins. And, of course, I retired on the spot. The other thing that Lori told me at the end was that I was entirely unfit to be a bachelor again, and that I needed to find someone else when she was gone. Thank heavens she told the same to Kate and to Tucker. 15 months later, Jane came along and proved just how perceptive and right Lori was. When Abraham Maslow invented the term self-actualizing person, he had Lori Hutchinson in mind. She invented herself. She invented a world of goodness around herself. She invented me. I am a lucky guy. For her, for our children, Kate and Tucker, and for Jane, and for all of you. Ecclesiastes got it right, I think. Surely there is a time to weep and mourn, and surely, with a little help from your family and friends, there is a time to laugh, a time to dance. Thank you, friends. Amen.